My name is Eleanor Vance. Right now, it feels like that name has been branded across every newspaper headline, every television screen, every whispering lip in this suffocating room. The air here in the courtroom is thick with judgment, a palpable weight pressing down on me, threatening to crush me whole. A dozen cameras flash, their lenses like unblinking eyes recording every flicker of despair, every trace of defiance on my face. The legal teams blur into a wall of dark suits, but the faces of the jurors, rigid and expectant, stand out in stark relief. I hear the muffled buzz of reporters' hushed tones, the click of camera shutters, the rustle of papers, all weaving into a terrifying soundtrack that chants a single word: murderer. A digital image, stark and unforgiving, flashed onto the giant screen behind the prosecutor. It was a photograph, a piece of evidence they called irrefutable, and its presentation sent a collective gasp rippling through the gallery. My heart plummeted, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. The whispers grew louder now, no longer contained, twisting into a furious roar that seemed to echo inside my own skull. Shame, searing in public, threatened to consume me. My throat felt dry, my hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I forced myself to stand taller, to meet the accusatory glares head-on. They had painted me as a monster and cold-blooded killer. They had presented their carefully constructed narrative, complete with its damning conclusion. My voice, surprisingly steady, cut through the clamor. Every eye snapped to me, the room falling silent in an instant. I paused, letting the weight of the accusation hang in the air. But before you believe that, before you condemn me, you need to know the truth. The real truth. My name is Eleanor Vance. They say I'm a killer. They want you to believe I murdered my own husband. But before you believe that, before you condemn me, you need to know the truth. The real truth. And it all started 3 months ago. Our life together, mine and David Vance's, was a quiet symphony of domestic bliss in our secluded wooden house. It stood nestled among the towering pines and whispering maples of Elmwood, a suburban haven that promised peace and permanence. My hair, a cascade of soft blonde waves that fell just past my shoulders, often caught the sunlight filtering through the kitchen window as I made David's morning coffee. My gray-blue eyes, usually filled with a thoughtful calm, would follow him as he moved through the rooms. I, Eleanor Vance, had always found comfort in routine, and David, for all his subtle complexities, seemed to thrive on it too. Our days began with the gentle hiss of the espresso machine, the scent of fresh grounds mingling with the crisp morning air. Our home with its worn leather armchairs, shelves overflowing with books, and the ever-present aroma of pine felt like an extension of ourselves. Warm, inviting, but perhaps with corners that held their own quiet secrets. David was a man of intriguing depths. He was a software engineer, brilliant and dedicated, but he also possessed a fiercely private side. His study, a room at the back of the house with heavy oak doors, was his sanctuary. He'd often disappear in there for hours, lost in his work, or sometimes, I suspected, just in his own thoughts. He had a way of being present, yet also distantly absorbed, even when we were together. I never pried. I respected his need for space, seeing it as part of the man I loved, part of the quiet strength that drew me to him. Our mornings were a cherished ritual. I would lay out his clothes, often a crisp blue shirt and dark trousers, while he read the financial news on his tablet. We'd share breakfast, a simple affair of toast and fruit, punctuated by comfortable silences, and the occasional soft murmur about the day ahead. These were the moments I, Eleanor, treasured most. The fabric of a life I believed was solid and enduring. That fateful morning 3 months ago started no differently. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky in hues of orange and pink as I watched David from the kitchen. He was meticulously tying his tie, his reflection in the hallway mirror capturing the focused intensity I knew so well. He looked exactly as he always did, impeccably dressed, a faint scent of his sandalwood cologne wafting through the air. "Big meeting today, Eleanor," he said, his voice a low rumble. He wasn't looking at me, but at his reflection, ensuring every knot was perfect. I walked over to him, my slender frame fitting perfectly against his, as I wrapped my arms around his waist. I leaned my head against his back, feeling the solid warmth of him. "You never need luck, David Vance," I whispered, pressing a kiss between his shoulder blades. "You're brilliant." He turned, his strong hands cupping my face, and leaned down for a quick, firm kiss. His lips were soft, familiar. "I'll be home for dinner," he promised, his eyes usually so guarded, holding a flash of genuine affection. "That new Italian place we wanted to try?" "Don't be late," I teased, a smile playing on my lips. He gave me one of his rare, full smiles, a flash of white against his tanned skin. Then he was out the door, the familiar sound of his car starting up, backing down the driveway, and disappearing onto the tree-lined street. I waved from the porch, watching until his silver sedan was out of sight. It was a normal Tuesday. Just another ordinary morning in our perfectly ordinary life. The day progressed with its usual rhythm. I tended to my small garden, replying to emails, a quiet sense of contentment settling over me. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, I started preparing for our dinner reservation, picking out a dress, checking the time. 6 o'clock came. Then 6:30. A flicker of unease began to stir within me. David was usually so punctual. I tried his cell phone. It rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. He's probably just in traffic, I told myself, trying to quell the rising tide of worry. I waited another 15 minutes. 7 o'clock, our reservation time. I called again. Voicemail. My heart gave an anxious thump against my ribs. I paced the living room, my hands twisting in front of me. This wasn't like David. He was meticulous about his schedule, considerate enough to always call if he was running late, especially for a dinner we'd both been looking forward to. I tried his office line, even though it was well past business hours. No answer. A cold knot began to tighten in my stomach. By 8 o'clock, panic had truly set in. I called his work colleague, Daniel Henderson. Daniel answered, sounding surprised. "David?" "No, he left around 5, Eleanor." He sounded genuinely confused, which only deepened my terror. Where could he be? My eyes darted to the driveway. His car, the silver sedan, was still gone. But then, as I walked toward the window, a chilling realization hit me. No, it wasn't gone. It was right there, parked neatly in its usual spot. My breath caught in my throat. His car was home. But David wasn't. This was wrong. Terribly, horribly wrong. If his car was here, he hadn't driven to work. Or he had returned, but then... What? Why wouldn't he come inside? Why wouldn't he call? My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, but all I found was an abyss of fear. I called his cell phone again, desperately hoping it would ring somewhere in the house. A sign he had simply forgotten it. A sign he was just here. But the voicemail message was the only reply. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. "My husband," I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. "David Vance. He's missing. His car is here, but he's not." The police arrived swiftly, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow over our quiet suburban street. Officer Miller, a stern-faced woman with kind eyes, led the initial search. She and her partner moved through the house with quiet efficiency, their flashlights probing every corner, every closet. My blonde hair felt heavy. My eyes, usually a calm gray blue, were wide with unshed tears, scanning every face, desperate for answers. No signs of forced entry, Mrs. Vance, Officer Miller announced, her voice gentle but firm. No struggle. The house, my sanctuary, now felt alien, its silence screaming his absence. They scoured the yard, questioned neighbors, checked for security footage from nearby homes. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was as if David Vance had simply evaporated. The helplessness was crushing. My elegant neutral sweater felt heavy, constricting. I stood on my porch, watching as the officers began to pack up, their faces grim. My beautiful, seemingly perfect life had shattered into a million pieces. We've done a thorough sweep, Mrs. Vance, Officer Miller said, her voice laced with an undeniable sympathy. We can't find any indication of foul play. No clues, no leads. My world was shrinking, suffocating me with its unanswered questions. They didn't find anything at all. No note, no sign, no trace of David. Nothing except a discarded cell phone, half hidden beneath a cushion on the living room sofa. It was David's. And on its screen, glowing ominously, was an unread message. From someone I didn't even know. That unread message on David's phone, from a number I didn't recognize, became the first thread they pulled. It seemed to twist around me rather than around David. Officer Miller's initial sympathy began to subtly fray, replaced by a scrutinizing gaze that made my skin prickle. Her questions at first focused on David. His habits, his friends, his work? But then they pivoted sharper, colder. My heart hammered. Of course I did. It was a standard part of our financial planning. She laid out the facts, not as information, but as accusations. A substantial policy taken out just a year ago, with me, Eleanor Vance, as the sole beneficiary. The way she presented it, it sounded less like a loving provision, and more like a carefully crafted motive. I tried to explain, to rationalize, but my words felt hollow in the sterile police station. Then came the deeper cuts. They found a large cash withdrawal from our joint account, made just a week before David vanished. A sum I couldn't account for, a transaction I hadn't initiated. My mind raced, searching for an explanation, but there was only a blank, terrifying void. I told them I knew nothing about it, that it wasn't me, but my denial only seemed to harden their expressions. The next day, they were back at my house. Not just Officer Miller and her partner, but a whole team. They had a warrant, their movements methodical, devoid of any warmth. My home, the place where David and I had built our life, was no longer mine. It was a crime scene in their eyes, every corner a potential hiding place for my supposed secrets. They tore through it, meticulously, ruthlessly. Books were pulled from shelves, drawers emptied onto the pristine white sheets they'd spread on the floor. My private diary, my jewelry box, even the hidden compartment in David's old desk, everything was scrutinized. Every personal item, every memory, was now potential evidence, handled with gloved hands and emotionless gazes. My privacy, my sanctuary, lay exposed and violated. I stood watching, my blonde hair falling over my face, feeling a profound sense of helplessness as they systematically dismantled my world. The whispers started as soon as the police cars left. Then they exploded onto the local news channels, then national tabloids. They painted a picture of me, Eleanor Vance, the grieving wife, as something else entirely. A cold, calculating woman. A black widow, they called me in print, suggesting I had engineered David's disappearance for financial gain, fabricating a story of a loving husband. I saw my face, my anguished expression, splashed across screens and newspapers, always with a caption that twisted my pain into suspicion. The phone stopped ringing. My closest friends, Maria and Thomas, offered hesitant support at first, but their calls became fewer. their voices strained with unspoken questions. Neighbors who once waved now averted their eyes, quickening their pace if they saw me on the street. The isolation was a chilling blanket, wrapping around me tighter each day, suffocating me with its unspoken judgment. I was alone, truly alone, with nothing but the silence of my once shared home and the gnawing fear that I was losing myself to this nightmare. Every shadow seemed to hold a new accusation. Every creak of the floorboards, a fresh reminder of David's absence. My world had shrunk to the four walls of my house, and even there, I felt like an intruder, under constant surveillance. Weeks bled into months. The investigation remained open, but the focus was clearly no longer on finding David. It was on me. Officer Miller, now Detective Miller, summoned me back to the station. Her face was unreadable, her gaze unwavering as she watched me, a silent predator waiting for her moment. Then she reached into an evidence bag, her movements slow, deliberate. And then she held up the silver key. It was small, intricately detailed, catching the fluorescent light of the interrogation room. "We found this, Eleanor," she said, her voice flat, "in your jewelry box." My breath hitched, a strangled sound in my throat. A key. In my own box. A key I had never seen, for a lock I didn't own. A key I had never seen, for a lock I didn't own. My mind raced, every nerve ending screaming. "I don't know," I managed, my voice raspy. "I've never seen that key before, Detective Miller." She simply watched me, her silence more damning than any accusation. The silver key, small and innocent, felt like a lead weight pressing down on my chest. It was the final piece they needed, a link, however tenuous, to paint me as the villain. Days later, the official charges were filed. Obstruction of justice, suspicion of foul play in David's disappearance, even an early mention of murder. My name, Eleanor Vance, was now synonymous with crime. My lawyer, Miss Davies, a formidable woman with a sharp mind and even sharper suits, fought tirelessly. But the evidence, circumstantial as it was, piled up. The life insurance, the unexplained cash withdrawal, and now the mysterious key found in my own jewelry box. She told me the situation was grave, that the narrative painted by the media, fueled by the police leaks, was almost impossible to undo. I faced the very real threat of arrest, of losing what little freedom I had left. The world outside my front door was no less cruel. The bank had frozen our joint accounts, citing the ongoing investigation. My access to funds was gone. Then came the phone call from my employer, a curt, professional voice, informing me that my services were no longer required, effective immediately. My reputation, meticulously built over years, had been shredded. How could I pay for anything? How could I even buy groceries, let alone Ms. Davies' exorbitant fees? I was financially crippled, standing on the precipice of utter ruin. The phone, once a constant companion, now remained silent. Maria and Thomas, my closest friends, had stopped calling weeks ago. I tried reaching out, leaving messages filled with desperation, but they went unanswered. Even my own parents, usually my unwavering support, looked at me with a new, unsettling caution. Their visits became shorter, their words carefully chosen, as if afraid of what I might say or what I might be. David's parents, grief-stricken and distrustful, had already cut me off entirely. I was truly, utterly alone, stranded in the vast, echoing silence of the house David and I had built together. That house, once a sanctuary of love and laughter, now felt like a cage. Every room was a ghost of a memory. Every shadow a reminder of David's absence and my crushing loneliness. I wandered through the empty spaces, my elegant clothes, now feeling like a costume I could no longer afford to wear. My reflection in the darkened windows showed a woman I barely recognized. Eyes hollowed, a haunted expression etched onto my face. There were moments, many of them, when the despair was so profound, I thought I would simply break. I would sit for hours in David's armchair, staring at the muted television screen, contemplating just giving up. What was the point? The police were convinced of my guilt. My friends had abandoned me. My family doubted me. I had lost everything: David, my reputation, my financial security, even my own peace of mind. Why fight a battle that seemed so irrevocably lost? But then, in the deepest troughs of my despair, a stubborn spark would ignite. A flicker of anger, a surge of raw, unyielding defiance. I knew David. I knew myself. This wasn't right. This couldn't be the truth. He wouldn't just vanish, leaving me to face this nightmare alone. There had to be something more. A gnawing suspicion, a relentless curiosity refused to let me surrender. I couldn't let his memory be tarnished by my inaction. I couldn't let my own life be destroyed by a lie. The system had failed me. The police were looking for a perpetrator, and in their eyes, Eleanor Vance fit the profile. No one was looking for David anymore, not really. If the truth was to be found, I realized with chilling clarity, I would have to find it myself. Even if it was just a tiny thread, a whisper in the dark, I would follow it. I had to. It was the only way out of this suffocating darkness, the only way to reclaim my name, my life, and perhaps, somehow, even David. I made the excruciating decision to sell the house. Couldn't afford to keep it, and its echoing silence was slowly driving me insane. As I packed the last box, my hand brushed against a loose floorboard in the workshop. A hollow sound. I suddenly remembered David spending hours in there, just tinkering. A hollow sound. I suddenly remembered David spending hours in there, just tinkering. It was a space I rarely entered. A masculine domain filled with the scent of sawdust and oil. A place where David retreated to his own world. I had respected that boundary, never questioning what projects consumed him there. But now, with a growing sense of urgency, I knelt down, my fingers tracing the outline of the loose board. It was perfectly cut, blending seamlessly with the others, almost impossible to detect, unless you knew it was there. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden silence of the workshop. Was this it? Could this be the thread I had been searching for? With a surge of adrenaline, I pried at the board. It lifted with surprising ease, revealing not a dusty crawl space, but a set of narrow wooden steps descending into absolute darkness. A cold draft wafted up, carrying a faint, metallic scent that prickled my nostrils. This wasn't just a storage area. This was something else entirely. I hesitated for only a second. My fear was potent, a tangible presence, but it was overshadowed by a desperate need for answers. I reached for the flashlight on David's workbench, its beam cutting through the gloom as I slowly, cautiously descended. Each creaking step echoed in the suffocating silence, a symphony of my own trepidation. The air grew heavier, cooler, with every foot I traveled downwards. At the bottom, the space opened into a surprisingly large room, far bigger than the footprint of the workshop above. This wasn't a casual hobby space. This was a professional setup. My flashlight beam danced across walls lined with soundproofing panels. Desks were laden with an array of complex electronic equipment I couldn't even begin to identify. There were soldering irons, circuit boards, wires of every color and gauge, glowing monitors displaying streams of indecipherable code. It was a labyrinth of technology, a world utterly alien to the David I thought I knew. A surge of nausea washed over me. David, my kind, unassuming David, the man who designed elegant, minimalist furniture, had built this secret subterranean lair. It was a betrayal of everything I believed about him, a stark, unsettling revelation. He had lived a double life, a secret world beneath our quiet suburban home, right under my unsuspecting nose. My eyes scanned the room, trying to make sense of the organized chaos. Maps adorned one wall, covered with cryptic markings and pins connecting seemingly random locations. Strange symbols, reminiscent of ancient glyphs or alchemical diagrams, were scrawled on a whiteboard, interspersed with complex mathematical equations. It felt like walking into a spy movie, a world of hidden agendas and dangerous secrets, and my husband was at the very heart of it. Then, on a cluttered shelf, tucked between a stack of technical manuals and a soldering station, I spotted it. A leather-bound journal, its cover worn, its pages dog-eared. My fingers trembled as I reached for it, my breath catching in my throat. This had to be important. I flipped it open, my eyes devouring the precise, familiar handwriting. David's hand. But the content? It was a descent into another reality. It spoke of a vast, clandestine organization, a pact that held immense power, its tendrils reaching into every facet of society, manipulating events from behind a veil of secrecy. My heart ached with a terrible understanding. David wasn't just tinkering. He wasn't just a man with a secret hobby. He was involved in something monumental, something dangerous beyond my wildest imagination. The journal wasn't a record of villainy. It was a chronicle of a desperate fight. He wasn't the monster they painted him to be. He was a warrior entangled in a war I couldn't even fathom. He wasn't a villain, he was a target. And suddenly, the pieces began to click into place. His disappearance, the police's disinterest in finding him, their eagerness to pin it all on me. It was all connected. They wanted him silenced. They wanted me to take the fall. Just as this chilling realization settled in, my phone, which I had forgotten in my pocket, vibrated with an unfamiliar number. My hands were shaking too much to answer immediately, but then it vibrated again. A text message. My name, Eleanor, flashed on the screen, followed by a cryptic warning. They're watching you. Don't trust anyone. Your husband is alive. Find the old man. My blood ran cold. Someone knew. Someone was out there, watching me, aware of David's fate, aware of this secret world. And they were reaching out. A potential ally. A ray of hope in the suffocating darkness. But who was Jay? And who was the old man? I looked around the hidden workshop again, no longer seeing it as a betrayal, but as a monument to David's courage, a testament to his secret struggle. My fear was still present, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now laced with a fierce determination. I had to understand this. I had to find David. My gaze fell upon a stack of blueprints tucked away beneath a workbench. They looked like complex architectural drawings, but with strange annotations. I pulled them out, and underneath, there it was. A faded photograph. David, looking younger, more serious than I had ever seen him, stood with 3 other men. Their faces were grim, their postures tense. And one of them, my blood ran cold. It was Mr. Thompson, our quiet, unassuming neighbor. The discovery of Mr. Thompson in David's photograph sent a jolt of ice through me. Our neighbor, the man who always waved cheerily as I pulled out of the driveway, was entangled in this nightmare. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of the unassuming old man with the grim, shadowy figure in the picture. This was no longer just about David. It was about the insidious tendrils of the Shadow Pact reaching into my seemingly ordinary life. I spent the next few days in a haze, poring over David's journal in the hidden workshop. The entries were a meticulous chronicle of an ongoing investigation, not a participation. He had compiled evidence, not contributed to their schemes. He detailed secret meetings held in nondescript warehouses, listed shell corporations, and tracked illicit financial transfers that funneled millions through offshore accounts. He documented their influence, their manipulation of local politics, and their ruthless silencing of anyone who threatened to expose them. David wasn't a member. He was an intelligence operative, meticulously building a case against them. He was trying to bring them down. The name the Shadow Pact appeared countless times, a dark motif in his desperate narrative. It referred to a vast, interconnected network of powerful individuals, operating beyond the reach of the law, their power derived from blackmail, corruption, and an almost fanatical adherence to a shared, unspoken agenda. It was terrifying in its scope, chilling in its audacity. I stared at the text message on my phone, the single letter a beacon of both hope and trepidation. Was this a trap? Or was it David's way of reaching out, a last resort? I had to take the risk. After agonizing deliberation, I replied simply, "Who are you?" The response was immediate, terse. "Meet me at the old bookstore on Elm Street. Midnight. Alone." My heart pounded. This was straight out of a spy novel. But David's life, and perhaps mine, depended on it. I arrived at the designated spot, a dusty, dimly lit antique bookstore, its shelves groaning with forgotten stories. A figure emerged from the shadows. A woman perhaps a few years older than me, her face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Her eyes, however, were sharp, intelligent, and wary. "You're Eleanor Vance," she stated, her voice low. "I'm Joanna." She didn't offer a handshake, just a penetrating gaze. Joanna, or Jay, was a phantom of David's secret life, a brilliant hacker and information broker he had trusted implicitly. She confirmed my growing suspicions. David had been gathering intelligence for months, meticulously documenting the Shadow Pact's activities. He was close to exposing them. He saw them as a cancerous growth, Joanna explained, eating away at the foundations of society. Together, we delved deeper into David's findings. Joanna's skills were incredible. She could navigate encrypted networks, track digital footprints, and piece together fragmented data with astonishing speed. We started with Mr. Thompson. Joanna quickly uncovered a web of shell corporations and offshore accounts linked directly to him, all funneling money into a central fund managed by the Shadow Pact. He wasn't just a neighbor, he was a key financial conduit. We then turned our attention to the other men in David's photograph. There was Senator Maxwell, a zating political star, whose sudden surge in campaign funds coincided perfectly with the Shadow Pact's activities. And then there was Dr. Elias Thorne, a respected scientist whose pharmaceutical company had recently secured several lucrative government contracts under questionable circumstances. These were not mere associates. They were pillars of the organization, their public personas masking a dark, collective agenda. As we connected the dots, a chilling picture began to emerge. David hadn't vanished because he was complicit. He had vanished because he was a threat. He was trying to protect me, to keep me out of this dangerous world, which was why he kept his secret workshop hidden even from me. His silence wasn't betrayal. It was a desperate act of love. He had tried to expose the Shadow Pact, and they had struck back hard. The deeper we dug, the more perilous our situation became. Anonymous emails arrived, containing cryptic threats. My phone would ring with dead air. Joanna noticed strange IPs attempting to access her systems, sophisticated attempts to pinpoint our location. We saw the same nondescript black sedan parked near the old bookstore on 3 separate nights. We were being watched. The Shadow Pact knew we were digging. The tension was a constant, suffocating presence, a cold hand gripping my throat. One evening, as we worked late into the night in a new secure location Joanna had found, a final encrypted message from David's secure server popped up. My hands trembled as Joanna unlocked it. It wasn't a video as I had half expected. It was an audio file overlaid with David's voice, distorted, clearly in distress, but undeniably his. We finally deciphered David's final message. It wasn't a threat. It was a plea, a desperate warning. And it named the architect of my downfall, the puppet master behind David's disappearance, the one who would gain everything if David vanished. David's own business partner, Richard Sterling. The discovery of David's business partner, Richard Sterling, as the mastermind sent a fresh wave of shock through me. It was a betrayal so profound, so personal, that it twisted my stomach into knots. How could a man David had trusted, a man who had often dined at our home, be capable of such monstrous deceit? Joanna and I immediately shifted our focus. Our days and nights blurred into a relentless pursuit of Sterling's digital footprint. Joanna, a true phantom in the cyber world, delved into his encrypted networks, unearthing layer after layer of deceit. We weren't just looking for connections to the Shadow Pact. We were looking for the threads of control, the puppet strings he pulled. We quickly discovered that Sterling was far more than just a successful businessman. He was a central figure, a key financial conduit for the Shadow Pact. His legitimate companies were intricately woven into a web of shell corporations and offshore accounts, meticulously detailed in David's journal. Millions were funneled through them. Lubricating the machinery of corruption and influence David had so desperately tried to expose. Sterling was not just David's partner. He was the Pact's banker, their strategist. Then Joanna hit pay dirt. She managed to breach Sterling's personal server, a digital fortress guarded by multiple layers of encryption. Inside, we found a trove of documents so damning, so meticulously organized, that they left no room for doubt. Emails explicitly coordinated the planting of false evidence in our home, outlining specific items and locations. There were records of substantial payments to a shadowy network of fixers and media contacts, all with the objective of manipulating public perception. A comprehensive media strategy was laid out, step by step, designed to paint me, Eleanor Vance, as a distraught, unstable wife, heartbroken but ultimately guilty. As the files cascaded onto the screen, a small, intricate detail caught Joanna's eye. A deeply nested file, far more secure than the others, remained stubbornly locked. My blood ran cold as I remembered. The small, intricately carved silver key, cool against my palm, tucked away in David's workbench drawer. I had almost forgotten it, dismissed it as a memento, a curious trinket. I raced back to David's hidden workshop, retrieving it with trembling hands. I brought the key back to Joanna. She took it, examined its delicate carvings, then her fingers flew across her keyboard. She wasn't trying to use it physically. She was analyzing its unique pattern, its composition, translating it into a digital sequence. With a single, precise command, she entered the code derived from the silver key. The screen flickered, and the final, most crucial layer of Sterling's secrets unfurled before us. It was all there. Every sickening detail. Meticulously fabricated emails between David and myself, staged arguments that never happened, manufactured calls to lawyers to discuss our supposedly failing marriage. All designed to portray me as volatile, desperate, and capable of anything. The media leaks, strategically timed to coincide with each new discovery of evidence against me, were orchestrated down to the minute. David had been a victim from the very beginning, a brilliant mind Sterling wanted to exploit. And then, once he became too dangerous, eliminate. He wasn't just an asset, he was a target. A cold, hard realization settled in my chest, heavier than any grief I had felt before. Sterling's motive wasn't just about seizing David's share of the company or expanding the Shadow Pact's influence. It was far more sinister, far more personal. He wanted more than David's removal. He wanted my complete and utter destruction. He knew David had been meticulously compiling evidence against the Pact, evidence that could bring them all down. He knew that I, Eleanor Vance, would eventually start asking questions, that I wouldn't just quietly accept David's disappearance. To secure his silence, David had to vanish without a trace. To ensure no one would ever believe a word I said, I had to be discredited, ruined, framed as a cold-blooded murderer. It was a calculated, ruthless plan to leave no loose ends, to bury the truth so deep it could never be unearthed. I stared at the screen, the glowing text mocking me, confirming every horrifying suspicion. All the files were there, the intricate plans, the detailed banking transactions confirming the payoffs, the explicit instructions for fabricating the evidence against me. Richard Sterling hadn't just wanted David gone. He wanted to destroy me completely. He wanted to wipe Eleanor Vance off the face of the earth, to erase my credibility, my very existence. But then the bitter truth hit me, a wave of despair chilling me to the bone. Who would believe me? A woman labeled a killer, a distraught widow who imagined conspiracies? The police, the very system I had once trusted, had already failed me, had already condemned me. They were either complicit or too easily manipulated by the power of the Shadow Pact. I knew, with a certainty that left no room for doubt, I couldn't go to the police. I had to expose him. I had to expose them all, not quietly within the confines of the law, but before the entire world. The police were out of the question. The system was compromised. I had to take matters into my own hands, to expose the truth not in a courtroom, but in the court of public opinion. I had the evidence. I had Joanna. We just needed the right platform. Joanna, ever the pragmatist, immediately began mapping out our strategy. We couldn't risk a traditional press conference. Too easy to manipulate, too easy for Sterling to control the narrative. We needed something direct, undeniable, live. We secured a broadcast slot on an independent online news channel, known for its investigative journalism and unyielding pursuit of truth. They were skeptical at first, but the sheer volume and damning nature of our evidence quickly convinced them. Days blurred into a frenzy of preparation. I meticulously reviewed every document, every audio file, every video clip. Joanna worked tirelessly to create an airtight presentation, ensuring every piece of evidence was authenticated and cross-referenced. My heart pounded with a mix of terror and resolute determination. This was it. My one chance to reclaim my life, to honor David's memory, and to bring the Shadow Pact crashing down. The day arrived with a cold, relentless rain. I sat in a makeshift studio, the bright lights blinding me, the microphone a cold weight against my trembling hand. My reflection in the monitor showed a woman etched with exhaustion, yet radiating an undeniable strength. The producer gave the signal. My breath caught in my throat. This was the moment I had replayed 1,000 times in my darkest nightmares. The woman branded a killer, now standing before the world to tell her truth. The cameras zoomed in. I could feel millions of eyes on me, judging, questioning, remembering the headlines that had shredded my life, the accusations that had become my shadow. My scarlet letter now screamed silently in the air around me. My voice, surprisingly steady, began to speak. I introduced myself, the name that had once been synonymous with infamy. I spoke of David's brilliance, his integrity, his unwavering commitment to exposing corruption. I spoke of his disappearance, the bewildering discovery of false evidence, the swift and brutal judgment of public opinion. I looked directly into the camera, past the lenses, past the production crew, straight into the homes of those who had condemned me. You were told a story, a fabrication. Then, Joanna, a silent sentinel by my side, began to operate the screen behind me. The first images flickered into view. Pages from David's encrypted journal, detailing the Shadow Pact's activities, meticulously time-stamped, meticulously documented. The murmurs from the crew were audible, a collective gasp. I saw a live feed of online comments scrolling rapidly, a mix of disbelief, anger, and slowly, a burgeoning sense of understanding. Next, we played fragments of the distorted audio file, David's desperate warning, clearly identifying Richard Sterling. The raw emotion in David's voice, even through the digital distortion, was palpable. The screen then filled with Joanna's undeniable evidence. The internal memos from Sterling's secure server, outlining Operation Silence, detailing how to frame me. The precise instructions for planting the fabricated evidence, the dates, the locations, the specific items. It was all there, laid bare. The room grew silent. The digital fortress Sterling had built now crumbled into pixels. The fabricated emails, the staged arguments, the manufactured calls to lawyers. Each piece of evidence against me was systematically dismantled, revealed as a cruel, calculated lie. We showed the intricate web of shell corporations and offshore accounts, the millions funneled through Sterling's legitimate businesses to lubricate the Shadow Pact's machinery. Every transaction was cross-referenced, every recipient identified. Then came the payments to the fixers, the media contacts, the precise strategies to manipulate public perception, to paint me as a distraught, unstable wife. The chilling precision of their plan to destroy my life, my reputation, my very sanity. The initial skepticism on the faces of the news crew had vanished, replaced by open-mouthed astonishment, and then a dawning horror. The online comments shifted from doubt to outrage, a wave of support beginning to surge. Joanna's expertise was flawless. She presented each piece of digital forensics with clinical precision, her calm voice a stark contrast to the explosive implications of her findings. She was my anchor, my sword. As the evidence mounted, the news channel began receiving urgent updates. Reports flooded in from journalists scrambling to verify our claims. Sources within Sterling's company were anonymously corroborating our findings, emboldened by the live broadcast. Suddenly, a small corner of the screen lit up with a breaking news alert. Richard Sterling, caught off guard by the sheer audacity and overwhelming evidence of our public expose, had reportedly fled his office building, refusing to answer any questions. The financial conduits, the shell corporations, the entire intricate web of his deceit was unraveling in real time. The Shadow Pact was being hit where it hurt most, its money. The broadcast cut to live footage of Sterling's lavish estate, swarming with police. The accomplice fixers and media contacts were being identified and detained. The dominoes, carefully stacked by David, meticulously organized by Joanna and me, were finally falling. Panic, I knew, must be seizing Sterling. His carefully constructed empire was crumbling, his carefully cultivated image shattering into a million pieces. The puppet master was no longer pulling strings. He was being hunted. The broadcast ended, but the story had just begun. The phone lines of the news channel exploded. Social media was ablaze. The world, which had so eagerly condemned Eleanor Vance, now rallied behind me with fierce indignation. Justice was not just a concept anymore. It was a tangible force, building momentum. My name, once whispered with contempt, was now spoken with respect, with apology, with a dawning recognition of a truth suppressed for too long. The tentacles of corruption were being severed, one by one. The police, finally free from Sterling's influence, moved swiftly. The arrests continued for days. A sprawling network of influence and deceit brought to its knees by the undeniable proof I had presented. Days later, I stood on the podium again. The blinding lights of the cameras still in my eyes, a silent testament to the storm I had weathered. This time, the sea of faces, journalists, officials, members of a public that had once condemned me, looked at me not with judgment, but with awe, and yes, with shame. The murmur through the crowd was no longer one of skepticism, but of anticipation. My voice, though still carrying the echoes of grief, was steady, resolute, and filled with the quiet power of vindication. "My name is Eleanor Vance," I declared, echoing my words from the broadcast, but now with the finality of victory. The flash forward, the haunting image that had opened my story, was now complete. I had not just told my story, I had rewritten it. I had claimed my truth. I had won. The silence in the room became suffocating as the final image flickered onto the screen. It was a screenshot of Sterling's personal ledger, detailing every payment made to fabricate evidence against me. His face, frozen in a mask of pure terror, was all the vindication I needed. The world, once a storm of accusations, slowly settled into a surprising calm. The public apologies from news outlets were almost laughable in their earnestness, a stark contrast to the venom they had spewed just weeks before. My name, Eleanor Vance, was no longer a synonym for murderess. It became a symbol of resilience, of a woman who fought against an impossible tide and emerged victorious. My reputation was restored, meticulously pieced back together by the same hands that had torn it apart. Book deals were offered, speaking engagements, invitations to conferences on transparency and corporate espionage. I found myself in demand, a reluctant hero. But the truth was, the victory felt hollow in the quiet hours. The public saw a survivor, but I knew the deep canyons that had been carved into my soul. The scars were not visible, but they were there, etched into every fiber of my being. Sleep was a luxury, often interrupted by phantom whispers, the metallic scent of David's workshop, the chilling echo of Sterling's cruel laughter. I jumped at shadows, flinched at sudden movements, my eyes constantly scanning, searching for threats that were no longer there, but felt ever present. Trust, once freely given, became a fortress I rarely allowed anyone to breach. Even with Joanna, my unwavering ally, I found myself holding back, a small part of me forever guarded. The world had shown me its teeth, and I had learned a brutal lesson. Everyone has a shadow. And David, my brilliant, enigmatic David. His sacrifice was the foundation of my freedom, the catalyst for justice. I often sat in his workshop, now stripped of its secrets, cleaned of the residue of his obsession, and wondered, was he truly gone? Or had a mind as ingenious and foresightful as David's orchestrated a final, perfect disappearance, not just from his enemies, but from me, to ensure my ultimate safety? A part of me, a tiny, stubborn part, sometimes clung to that unlikely fantasy, a comforting lie in the face of an unbearable truth. I missed him with an ache that transcended the certainty of death. A longing for a man who had loved me fiercely, yet kept a universe of secrets hidden away. I never forgot David. I never forgot the terror. I never truly forgot the fear that had been my constant companion. But over time, the relentless grip of those memories loosened, transforming into something different. I learned to live with the ghosts, not to be haunted by them, but to understand what they had taught me. I found a quiet strength in accepting my fractured past, not in erasing it. The truth, in its raw, brutal form, had broken me, but it had also forged me anew. I rebuilt my life in the quiet suburban house, the place that held so many memories, both joyful and terrifying. I learned to distinguish between solitude and loneliness. I planted a garden, its vibrant colors a defiance against the monochrome of my despair. I discovered that peace wasn't the absence of pain, but the ability to carry it with grace, to let it inform my empathy rather than define my existence. The world is full of truths waiting to be uncovered, and shadows that linger just beneath the surface of the mundane. My story, Eleanor Vance's story, is a testament to that. It's a reminder that beneath the calm facade of everyday life, beneath the carefully constructed realities, there are always secrets. And sometimes those secrets demand to be heard, to be brought into the light, no matter the cost, no matter the truth they reveal. My journey taught me that the biggest shadows often reside not in forgotten corners, but in the deepest parts of the human heart. And the greatest victory is not just in uncovering the truth, but in finding the strength to live with it and to continue against all odds to seek the light.